can bring out the chair around from the front if we need it for some people. Okay. I think we're going to get started right now if everybody's about ready. I'm Mark Shull. On behalf of myself, my wife Rebecca, and my co-hosts Darlene Yapley and Marie Jo Fremont, I'd like to welcome you to this event to get to know the candidates for the upcoming election. Also, I'd like to recognize Lydia Koo, who is in the audience in the back, who is a current council member, for participating as well. It's a little warm today, so feel free to kind of move around to try to stay in the shade and have some water and whatever else you need. But again, appreciate everyone coming out today, and now I'll turn it over to Darlene, who will be the moderator.
Okay. Thank you, Mark, and welcome everyone. Just a few housekeeping items. We will be videotaping the event, and so I'll send out an email once it's available if you want to see it again. And if you need to use the restroom, it's in this workshop here. You just go right out here into the back. So that's available. And then today's agenda, we're going to start out by opening remarks from each of the candidates, followed by pre-submitted questions. Thank you for sending those in. And then we'll have live questions from the audience. And lastly, there'll be an opportunity to mingle individually with the candidates. So without further ado, let's introduce our candidates. Our first one is Pat Boone. Have a seat there, Pat. Yeah, thank you. Next candidate is Allison Cormack. We have Council Member Tom Du Bois. We have Council Member Eric Vilseth. And Council Member Corey Wolbeck. Okay, each of you will have 2 minutes, and I'm very excited to be the timekeeper since I've been on the other side of this. And maybe I should do what happens to us. Wow, with so many people, we're going to have to cut your time in half. No, just kidding. That only happens if you, yeah, the turnaround's fair play. Then you have to change your comments. Okay, so we're going to start out, and each of them will have 2 minutes. And Maury will hand you the microphone there. And we'll start with Pat, and then when we go through the questions, we'll rotate who starts. Okay, Pat, ready and go.
And go. Good evening, everybody. I'm Pat Boone. Yeah, I'm Pat Boone. I'm the real one. I don't know who that other guy is. Actually, it's funny. I actually do know him. I used to get his mail a lot when I lived in Los Angeles back in my early life, and I used to take my mail to him, and he said, "Oh, you're the other Pat Boone." I'm like, "No, I'm the real Pat Boone," and we actually know each other after all these years. Well, I spent my career in broadcasting as a TV news reporter. My latest assignment was NBC Bay Area. And that's what brought me here from New York City, where I was a reporter there as well. A lot of people are asking me, why are you running? You've been in Palo Alto for 2 years. You don't know enough that's going on here. You're not in touch with the issues. You're going to be a newbie. Why are you running? Well, because I love Palo Alto. Palo Alto chose me out of all the cities I've lived at in this country. And it chose me to make this my home. So I have great heart for this city. And I believe right now in the city council, as much as I applaud them for their efforts and what they do as elected officials, I think they may have lost their way a little bit. I think there is a disconnect with the residents. And I think there needs to be a time where someone needs to stand up and get it right. And that's why I'm running. That's why I'm choosing to run. And I think a new face, a new perspective is better than continuing to elect the same old people. One thing is true. It may be contested, but it's pretty much true. You can't elect the same old people over and over again and expect a new result. You need someone new. You need a fresh perspective. And that's what I bring to this race. And as for knowing the issues, I know them pretty well. And the ones I don't know, I listen, I learn, and I make the right decision at the right time. I believe I am the new choice of a new form of candidate. And there's nothing magical that I bring to this race, but just one little interesting aspect about me. I listen to you, and I believe the voters are my boss, period.
Thank you. The next time we'll have Allison start. So each of you will be asked to answer, and we have 5 questions. First question is, Assume you have $1 million. What will you do to reduce traffic for Palo Alto?
Well, that's a great question. I think $1 million may not be enough. I think that's probably the first thing right there. So we have to figure out what do we do with this money and how we can probably get a little bit more. Traffic is such a interesting thing, because we talk about the headache that continues to plague us so much. And the first thing I think we need to understand about the traffic is this is not a situation that's going to go away overnight. This is going to take some time to do proper things, make correct decisions. One of the things that I am for is managing our business growth here in town, making sure it doesn't get out of line, making sure it doesn't explode, keeping our caps in place. I think that's one of the ways that we can help with the traffic. So we have to do that as one thing. Another thing that we have to do is look at ways in which we can get more people out of their cars and look at carpooling, look at shuttle programs and busing programs. That's another option. Getting people to take Caltrain and whatever they can do to not use their vehicles. So that's what some of that money can be used for, but just like I said, it needs to be a lot more. Another thing that we can look at is a new traffic light program in which we can direct the traffic lights to move traffic a little bit faster. There's a lot of different ways of utilizing that money, but once again, I think this is something that Palo Alto just can't fix by itself. And we are fooling ourselves if we think that we fix traffic and traffic in the Bay is going to be perfect. This has to be a regional effort. We need to all work together in fixing traffic. This can't be Palo Alto alone. We need to work with other cities, other municipalities, and come up with a way to fix our traffic issues. So the cities work together, thus we have these flows and they make more sense, versus if it's all working perfectly in Palo Alto, what about the residents coming from Menlo Park or Mountain View? There comes a jam right there. So we have to look at better programs, utilizing our shuttle system. I think that's going to be the bigger thing, getting people out of their cars and talking to other municipalities, working with us to make our traffic a little bit better.
What is your position on facilities, for example, the First Baptist Church, Cassaleia School, and Tenney Mortuary, expanding under conditional use permits in R1 single-family residential neighborhoods? Sorry, Pat, I messed my own process up.
That's okay. My statement is a little short, so I'll be able to save us some time here. Pretty much what everyone is saying about there's certain issues that we cannot discuss because we may have to recuse ourselves at a later time. My point is very short but very direct. I believe that neighborhoods need to stay as strong as they can neighborhoods. Pretty simple stuff, huh? And also I believe that we need to enforce the laws that we have. That pretty much sums it up for me. You can fill in the blanks what you feel there. But I think that we just have to always know that the neighborhoods are a reason to be a neighborhood, and we need to look at that. That's it.
Okay. Question? The only time the FAA takes action to address the airplane noise problem seems to be when litigation or the threat of litigation by cities. Assuming there's a reasonable legal case to be had on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the highest, how would you rate yourself as a council member who will argue for legal action?
Seems like... Well, I think on this issue, I think it's 10. We got to be aggressive about it. Here's the deal. We're tired of hearing the airplane noise. I don't think anyone is going to stand up and cheer and applaud for this. So I think this is something that we have to be a little more aggressive about. Tom indicated that, pretty much the squeaky wheel gets heard. Well, I believe let's be as squeaky as possible. They're giving us noise. Let's give them noise back. I think that's what's important here. We've got to stand up and be a little bit stronger about this. Studies are great. I think they're wonderful. But you know what? We're beyond that. Is it coming again? Got to be perfect timing. It's got to stop. There we go. It's going to be happening over and over and over again. This is time that we do something aggressive, and I think it's needed, and needed immediately. Oh, 10.
That's right, you said.
Under current zoning regulations on height, density, and parking, small housing units, for example, the President Hotel, cannot be built by developers. Do you support changing any of these housing regulations? Why or why not?
What's the question one more time, please?
The question is, under current zoning regulations on height, density, and parking, Small housing units, for example, President Hotel, cannot be built by developers. Do you support changing any of these housing regulations? Why or why not?
Well, I'm glad you brought up the President Hotel because that's one of the reasons why I'm in this race as well. I think that, you know, it's taken too long for the entire council to be on the side of the residents who are in that hotel who are facing eviction coming up just days after Election Day. Now, they have done some improvements, and I will applaud council for that, but I think a lot more needs to be done. As for zoning, I think we need to review that. I think we need to review every zoning regulation or every zoning procedure we can possibly have in place, especially in downtown. I think that we need to look at parking as a factor of that. I agree that there are some residents who don't drive at a certain age, but we also have to be realistic that parking is going to be something that we have to tackle as well. I think this question is kind of a question that you can't really, and Corey kind of tapped on a little bit, you can't really answer in 2 minutes. It takes a little bit more time to look inside this, and I think that during this forum, it's certainly a question to get an idea of where we are, but I think it's not something to get a full answer on. So, you know, I think for myself, I need a little more time to explain this in more detail because I think that we need to do a little bit more review of this, but certainly we need to look at zoning options that make sense, and we also need to make sure we have the best interests of the residents in place because we don't need to be pushing residents out or figuring out ways in which we're zoning in a special way in which people don't have a place to live anymore.
This will be the last of the pre-submitted questions, so if you didn't get your question answered or asked during the pre-submitted, think about your question for the open Q&A that will be next. Our last question is, do you think Palo Alto should have any renter protections, and if so, what?
Yes.
A lot of pain from a lot of residents there who don't have rental protections, and they wish they were in place. And right now at this hour, a lot of these people are hurting because they don't know where to go. And many people are saying that they should get assistance and they should get protections, but then there's also a debate by some in government who believe that if a person makes a certain amount of money, they don't get it, not you. When in fact, this needs to be across the board. I think we should have rental protections in place here in the city of Palo Alto, and we ought to do it with our heart and have some common sense about it. The people that pertain to the rental protections are a strong base of the voters and a strong base of the residents here in Palo Alto. And we ought to realize that and not just pass that over as, well, that has to be a certain way. I think we should have more stronger protection for renters. I think the just cause eviction should get out of here. I think that residents, that landlords should, without a doubt, offer rental assistance, but not just a month or 2 months. I'm talking about 6 months. If you're going to throw somebody out because you want to build a better, higher, more expensive unit, that's okay because we understand that's how business goes. It may not be something we all agree with. You need to take care of those renters and make sure they're going to be okay because it hurts. I don't know if anybody here, and I'm certain in this diverse crowd, a lot of people probably know someone who lives at the President Hotel. They don't know where to go. They don't know what's going to happen in their lives. And many of us, we have a home and we don't have to worry about November 12th being an issue for us. But imagine if it was you. You would want the city to have your back on this and have rental protections in place. Because it hurts when you have nowhere to go and you have nobody who's there for you. Palo Alto needs to be there for every renter in this city.
You can keep that mic there. So we're going to open it up for Q&A, and Marie Jo is going to come out to the audience and receive your questions. If you can keep it to one question, if you have a follow-up question, we will allow you to address that afterwards, but I don't think we want follow-up questions during the Q&A. So you can ask one question, and then afterwards you can mingle and ask further questions. So, okay. Over there? Okay.
Hi. Hi. Can you hear me? So I'm a neighbor, and I'm very involved, or at least watching a lot of the things that happen in the schools, which are really important to our community. And I had my television on one Tuesday night, and I heard someone on the school board mention that there is a proposal that the city is going to cut $5 million of services to the students. And I wondered if it, don't know if it's true or not, but it was publicly stated in order to help balance the city's budget, I guess. But it led to another question, which is just, what is your view on the balance of responsibility between the city and the schools for the children in our community, particularly in light of things that have been kind of vexing our community with, mental health services for our children.
I agree with Eric on some points, but I think overall, between the school system and city council, number one, there needs to be a lot more communication between both municipalities, both bodies. I think that's sometimes what's lacking, is that they're not just talking enough. And that can clear up a lot of confusion or misconceptions about things. And also understanding each other a lot more. It's like, what do you need? What do you need? What do you need? What are you lacking? How can we help? So I think communication is going to be one of the most vital things that needs to step up between the two entities. One of the things that my campaign is about as well is the students, getting them involved in government. One of the things that I wanted to bring on to city council as a council candidate is that I want to create a junior city council. And you're like, what? More candidates that we have to vote for? These are members that the elected city council would actually appoint 10 members in the community under the age of 20, so they could be as young as 11 on up to 20 years old, members of the school system, young adults here in the community, that can be our connection to the younger people here in the community. Not only what's important to them on the school system and what's going on in their educational area, but what's important to them in their lives. What do they do? What do they need? What do they need to get around, or what do they need to have fun, or what do they need in their communities that we may be lacking? A lot of times in these discussions, we don't talk enough about the kids, and we don't talk enough about how the teens are just bored here because we don't have enough for them in this town. So I think we need to step up and take care of our children, but have a connection, not only between the school system and council, the kids and council.
So, residential homes. In contrast, some communities have put the issue of cell towers on a ballot so that voters can decide. And I'm wondering if you all believe that this is something that the voters should be able to weigh in on, potentially through a ballot measure.
I had a chance to check out actually one of those cell phone towers. It's just out front of Steve Jobs' former house. And it is noisy as heck. And you imagine that, plus more, plus more, plus more, dozens and dozens and dozens all around town. I talked to some residents in that area and how frustrated they are about that and how they feel the city is ignoring them on that issue. And I heard them clearly. They believe that it should be underground. Obviously, the antenna has to be up top because you won't be able to get a line of sight type of a signal, but the base of it should be a consideration of being underground. I think that should be part of our conversation. I think that should be something that we heavily discuss. Now, I know that we're going to get that on both sides, but I think that that's something that, aesthetically, it's not the best. And I think noise-wise, you can hear this from sitting in your car if you're down the block, without a doubt. I ask anybody, if you have not been near any of these cell towers, go visit one. And then imagine that outside of your window when you're trying to go to sleep at night, and how you have to walk down the street with your family and your dog and your kids, and what that's going to look like every single day, and they're not going anywhere. I think the city could and should have a much more involvement in where these need to place. And I think, honestly, we need to look at some replacement going on here. Because if not, what's going to happen is that it's going to grow, and we're going to get more. If we don't do anything about it, that's exactly what the end result will be, in my opinion.
I've seen a bunch of news stories about towns and cities that have really run into problems with the conflict between pension obligations and current services. Is that something that you think is a near-term problem for Palo Alto? If not, why not? And if so, how do you mitigate it?
I'm glad I had that question first here on the dais. I can already yield that Mr. Eric will probably have a better answer than me, but I'll try my best. Thank you for that question, sir, by the way. I think that's a big issue that a lot of towns, not only Palo Alto, is dealing with. I think some of the ways that we can look at the pension problems that is growing and growing and growing is look at our budgeting. Work with our city manager in chopping down a lot of positions that are unneeded, a lot of duplicating positions, because we're not getting a return on the money that we expected to get from CalPERS. So I think that's going to be very important, that we're going to have to realign our budget over the next few years. Also, we need to look at maybe another source of income that can help out that particular budget that's going, those pension fees that are going out of control. I think it's a lot of things that we need to work in, but most importantly, we need to start working on it now, which I'm certain there is some movement, but we need to be more aggressive on it. Just like I said, I yield to Eric. He'll probably be the professor on this more than myself, but I believe that this is something that we cannot ignore, and I know it's so easy to kick it down the road, kick it down the road, kick it down the road, but I think it all starts at home within the city of Palo Alto and each municipality along the way. We look at our own budgets, we look at our own finances. One particular option is that we can look at holding off on some capital improvement projects that are millions of dollars that can hold off, and that can go back into that program. So there's a lot of different things that we can look at, but we need to get aggressive about that now and not just talk about it.
Okay, we're going to take 2 more questions, and there'll be an opportunity to mingle with the candidates after.
Why do we need a new police station? Is that really one of our highest priorities right now? I've heard several reasons, such as we're outgrowing the old one, it's not earthquake safe, but those don't seem compelling to me. So what would you say the reason we need a new police station is?
I agree with Tom and Eric on this stance. I think a new building is necessary, and Corey pretty much essence on that as well. Last Sunday, I had a chance to actually ride with Palo Alto Police. I got to be a cop for about 4 hours, and it was pretty cool, actually. And I got a perspective of what the police officers deal with in that building and being a police officer here in the city of Palo Alto. One of the things that they say that they don't have right now is a shooting range. And this is the things that you can add into a new facility. There are a lot of things inside the current building that just are not within their workings of doing their job, and it is an aging building. I went down into the basement. It's an aging location. I implore anyone to walk and do a tour throughout that facility. So I think a new facility is definitely important, and I think we need to support them. So I'm going to be a little biased on this. I'm a big supporter of police, fire tremendously, and anything that we can do for the city, we can move around money. I think it is imperative that we do that, but I think that we need to be behind them tremendously. But not only do we stop with a building, I think we need to look at some type of particular temporary housing or some type of housing options for our officers who are working 12-hour shifts, 14-hour shifts, and many of them are driving home 2 hours away from here. I rode with an officer last week, Officer Juan. He lives in Discovery Bay. Many of you know where that's at. That's his commute every single day to serve us and protect us here in the city of Palo Alto. So we need to think about our officers, not only the structure in which they work in, but the ones that work inside that facility.
Okay, before we take our last question, I'd like to recognize Council Member Karen Holman. Karen is running for the Mid-Peninsula Regional Open Space Board, and she'll be available after to chat. Thank you for joining us, Karen.
Okay, so last question.
Hi, thanks for coming. I work at Pali. I can tell you cross-country, wrestling, and track and field are the only non-cut sports. So yes, we need better sports. And sometimes when I'm at Pali and a plane flies over and I can't talk to a student, I shake my fist at the sky. Sometimes I call Bert Gonoin, who's the noise guy at SFO. Clearly you all understand this critical issue of noise pollution in our area. What I want to know is, after you shake your fist at the sky, what's one thing you would do? Would it be to try and join the roundtable at SFO, which we've been trying to do for years? Would it be to get that South Bay thing going on? What's that first thing you do after you go like this? Ah!
Right. We need to put more pressure on our congressional delegation. We need to get them to work with us in Washington. I mean, they're there, they work in Washington, so they need to put more pressure on the FAA. And I think we need to look at more paths. I think we need to look at path changes. I think that's important. Yeah, I do the hand up in the air as well. I'm with you on that one, tremendously. So I think, yeah, it's agreeable that, here as a city council member, you cannot change the path. You cannot really have authority over that. But I believe that the ones that can, we need to put even more pressure on them to make sure that they can take care of this issue, because this is only going to get worse. We've got more paths that are certainly going to be coming with more people working here in the Bay Area. So we all can't keep doing this and nothing be done. Something has to be done, and we need to let that be known. I think the biggest issue that we deal with any issue is that we have to realize that what we're dealing with right now, it's bad. But if nothing changes, it's going to get worse, and that is a guarantee. So putting pressure on congressional delegation is the #1 thing I like to do.